What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today's going to be an interesting one because we got a ton of new spoilers from Aether Drift, which is just around the corner here. And today I'm going to be ranking my top 5 most interesting cards. That's right, guys. Today we're taking a look at Aether Drift, and we're going to actually specifically be looking at my top 5 most interesting card picks. This is by no means a, my top 5 most elite cards that I think are going to shake up the meta or anything like that. And if you guys are new here, I am pretty much a standard only player for the most part. So this is going to be my look at these cards through that realm, and that scope is standard only. But these are my top 5 picks that I saw and immediately just kind of, took me aback, like, whoa, that's kind of cool, or that's pretty powerful. So we're going to take a look at that. I think it'll be pretty interesting, and then we'll talk about a couple of extra cards at the end that I think are powerful and could potentially see a lot of play. But for the most part, this is my most interesting cards to look at for Aether Drift. Let's get started. Up first, we got ourselves a legendary Naya creature, and it's going to be Samut, or Samut. I'm not too sure how to say this card's name. I'm very bad at pronouncing card names, but I know we have this particular creature in standard already in Gruul, and it has haste, it draws you cards, it does some really cool things, and they're bringing it back as a legendary creature here. It is very expensive, which is my only drawback to this card, because typically you're going to probably only run 1 or maybe 2 of these at max. But what makes this card to me land on my most interesting lists is the fact that this and only a couple other cards have a really interesting key mechanic here, which is that they can play off of other speeds other than max speed. So if you guys haven't heard, there's this thing called max speed in the set where a lot of cards trigger these really crazy abilities once you reach max speed. There's a thing called start your engines, which is built onto this card as well, which can start you out at speed 1, and every time you deal damage you get an extra speed for that turn. It only triggers once each turn. So at the bare minimum, let's say you get start your engines down on turn 1, you got to wait 3 more turns after that before you can activate the max speed. Now, I said a bunch of times that the only way I could see this really being viable is if you've got cards that can actually do things with speeds other than max speed, because if you're trying to deal that damage out over the course of 4 turns, typically you're looking to close a game already as it is. You don't really need that extra. It kind of feels like a win more sort of strategy to do the max speed stuff. It just seems really hard to deal out the special abilities. So I like this card because it does things when you have just 1 speed. So let's say you throw this card down on its, the 6th drop curve, whatever, to finish the game. Typically in Naya, in this particular format, and with this card, if you're building around it, you're probably going to have a lot of creatures on the field because of its ability. Its ability says that other creatures you control get XO, or plus XO, I should say. And it's dependent upon the speed that you're at. So let's say we drop this down and you start your engines. No matter what, all your creatures are going to get plus 1-0, which is pretty insane. It's just basically an anthem for all your creatures in the attack form. But also your non-creature spells cost X less to cast. Now, what makes this interesting is it's just going to keep getting bigger, right? Because if you're attacking in and dealing your first amount of damage, and your creature's only getting pumped by 1, the next turn they're going to be pumped by 2, then 3, then 4, because you're dealing damage, right? So I think this card is very interesting. I think it opens up the door for a lot of other cards to potentially do that as well. I did see one other black card that did something with their speed based on whatever number you were at. I find that mechanic very interesting as long as it doesn't have to be required to get to max speed. And this is one of those cards where you're getting valued at whatever speed you're at. So I really like this card. I think it's very interesting, and I think it opens the door for that max speed mechanic and start your engines, and makes it a lot more fun in my opinion. So this is card number 1 as my most interesting. And we're going to go ahead and get into number 2. I think it's going to get a little bit more interesting as we go along. So that was number 1. Let's take a look at number 2. Number 2, we got ourselves Oviya. Now, Oviya is interesting to me in a lot of ways, but I can also see it being not as good as I think it might be. Okay, so Oviya is a card. It's 4 mana. It's a 1/2 creature, which obviously, what's the catch? Because that is very tiny. Well, it's got a big catch. This card has a really sick ability tied to it, which is paying 1, tapping it down, and you can put any creature from your hand to the battlefield. Now, that could possibly be absurd, right? That is insane. For 1 mana being able to play any creature from your hand. Now, there's a couple of things here. Well, let's talk about its passive ability. Basically, any creatures that are attacking is going to gain trample, which is also pretty helpful because the creatures you're going to be playing are going to be pretty big. Also, it can play artifacts from your hand, which Portal to New Phyrexia, I mean, that's a pretty big artifact that you'd love to get down. But anyways, the downsides to this card are pretty huge. It needs to be tapped to activate its ability, right? So if it comes in with Summoning Sickness, you got to wait a full turn for this to work. Typically the card's not going to hang around a full turn. This is one of the most must answer cards I've ever seen, unless you want to lose the game the following turn. So this card is probably going to get removed most of the time off of the battlefield. Now, the Summoning Sickness, I don't know if it's like bad enough that I wouldn't play it, because there's some ways you can give it haste. Obviously, there's some tricks you can do to give the creature haste. I don't know if I want to jump through all those kind of hoops to try to give this haste the moment it enters the battlefield, but you could play it with things like Tyvar. Tyvar, you know, on turn 3, is it Tyvar? Yeah, Tyvar on 3. It gives all your creatures the ability to activate their abilities as though they have haste. This would have to come down on turn 5. You need the extra mana to play it, to do its ability, but it would be able to come in with haste and do its ability right away. But the upsides to this card are the fact that you can do it seemingly at any time. It doesn't say it's sorcery speed, which is pretty cool. So if you play this on turn 4, it's, you know, whatever, somehow survives. It's you know, not dying the turn that it comes down somehow, some way. You can activate its ability at instant speed on the opponent's turn, which could really change the game in a lot of ways. Again, if you're dropping a Portal to Phyrexia and the board's empty, maybe you wait till the opponent, you know, play some creatures, then, you know, drop that onto the battlefield. But obviously big creatures too. I mean, if you got another big creature that doesn't have haste and you don't want it to get removed off the battlefield right away, you can wait till the opponent, you know, responds to kill this creature, then you tap it down in response to play your creature, and hopefully there's no more kill spells to be worried about. There's a lot of upside, a lot of downside. I see this creature being completely insane, but also very easy to deal with. So it's one of those things where I don't think it's going to be as scary as it could be. But if it goes off, it is pretty intense, man. For 1 mana to just put anything on the field, I mean, that's just nuts. Anyways, that's my card number 2. All right, card number 3 is going to be Loot. Loot. I never thought I'd say that. Loot hasn't been very good for a while now. Loot is typically not a very cool card or a very good card. But in my opinion, this might be one of the most broken cards that I've seen so far. I personally really like this card. This might be a hot take. I've been hearing people talk about this card, and I've heard both sides of the stories. I like it, man. I don't see too much downside to this thing. Obviously, the exhaust is only a once in a game sort of usage, which I think if they didn't have exhaust tied to each of these abilities, this card would be banned within a week. But this card has exhaust, thank goodness, which means you kind of have to work around it to get more value out of the card. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, exhaust means you can use an ability to a creature 1 time for the game, which is pretty cool new mechanic, honestly, and it puts restrictions on cards like this and makes it a lot more safe, because this is double strike, vigilance, and haste. It comes down, you can tap it right away to use its abilities. It has 3 abilities to choose from, which are all pretty nuts for the most part, but the draw 3 is really what kind of draws my eye. If this thing comes down, you hit the draw 3 immediately, you've already got your value, right? So if the opponent does, you know, blow up the loot and take it out immediately, that's fine. You got 3 cards off of it, so you're winning the value race on that. I feel like this card is nuts strictly for that alone. If there's a creature on the field that you just absolutely have to deal with before they put a Sheltered by Ghost on it or something, you can deal the 3 damage right away. Now, you do have to have 1 extra mana, of course, to tap in order to use its ability when it comes onto the battlefield, which is another restriction to work around. But typically in the Colors of Temur, you're going to be ramping anyway. So does it really matter? Probably not. You're probably going to get this down. You're going to have extra mana to spend for the most part. Now, here's the other thing, right? Is again, because of its exhaust abilities, you can only use it 1 time. If you blink it, it becomes, you know, a fresh new creature on the battlefield. You should be able to activate those abilities again. In my personal opinion, I haven't really verified those rules yet, but it seems like blinking this thing would work just fine to resetting it and using those abilities again. You could also bounce it back to your hand, replay it again. There's a lot of things you can do to exploit this. And keep using those exhaust abilities over and over again. And Soul Cauldron is something that comes to mind too. I know a lot of people have been, you know, using Soul Cauldron to put abilities onto their other creatures. Imagine putting these abilities, these 1 mana, absolutely broken abilities on any creature you want. Just by simply putting it in the graveyard, Soul Cauldron, give it to a 2-drop creature that you just put on the field, and now your 2-drop is pulling off these sort of really ridiculous mechanics on turn 3. I mean, it's crazy to even think about that. So, I mean, Loot to me personally can be exploited in so many different ways that I think it's completely broken. And if it wasn't exhaust abilities and they can use this every single turn, I would expected this to get banned. But I'm glad it's exhaust. It does force you to work around its you know, busted bustiness a little bit to kind of exploit it some more. So I think Loot's pretty insane. In my opinion, one of the most broken cards I've seen so far from the set release. But that's just my personal opinion, and that's my card number 3. All right, on to card number 4, and probably my favorite from this whole thing that we got here. Houston, we have a problem. We got Possession Engine, and it's a 5-mana 5/5 vehicle artifact, and it's ridiculous because it just basically takes a creature from your opponent. So this enters the battlefield, you steal an opponent's creature, you have that creature, and it's just yours until this leaves the battlefield, I believe, right? As long as you control this vehicle. Yeah, so you have it until the vehicle leaves the battlefield. Now, we've seen this mechanic time and time again. It hasn't been too much of an issue until that is Agent of Treachery, right? Agent of Treachery showcased to us, and it got banned because of this, but it showcased to us that there's a lot of problems with this sort of mechanic where you can just straight steal an opponent's creature, because tied with this card, you've got a lot of other things you can do. You can copy this over and over again with certain combinations. Granted, I think it's going to be much tougher to pull that off in this current standard, but there are things like 3 steps ahead that can copy an artifact. Then you've got things like Season of Burrow, I think that's the white one. Season of Weaving, the blue one. It can copy artifacts multiple times, and you can continuously steal the opponent's creatures over and over. Not to mention that once you've created that token, you can start creating more tokens off of things like Caretaker's Talent. There's so many issues I can see happening with this that I think it's going to be extremely exploitable. Again, mostly because of what we've seen with Agent of Treachery. Now, Agent of Treachery was a better card because it drew you 3 cards on the back end after you had X amount of creatures from the opponent's deck, which really just locked an opponent out of the game. So hopefully we won't have that issue. Again, we've had sort of situations like this many times where the card was not even effective, and this might be one of those times. But the fact that it's an artifact instead of a creature, right? That's where I'm leaning towards more busted, because there's a lot of creatures that have done this in the past, but creatures are easy to remove. Most people have, removal on ready for situations like this, and it's not a big deal. When you have an artifact that comes in and steals something, and then now you have a bunch of things in the meta that can copy artifacts and then copy artifact tokens and then copy tokens in general, I can see this becoming an issue. I think it's really cool. I've always liked that sort of mechanic. I just hope it doesn't turn into an Agent of Treachery thing where it's like, you can't resolve anything because it's just going to keep getting stolen. I don't see that happening. I'm going to be honest with you guys. If I'm being a complete realist here, the standard meta we currently have is Pixie Bounce, right? Okay, so we steal a Pixie, and then what? The opponent's going to hit us with, this town ain't big enough, and bounce it back to their hand and then replay it again. Right now, the way standard looks right now, I don't see this being very good. But I do think it is exploitable to the max, and I think that it's going to be really fun to try to break this and do some really cool combinations with it. That's why I have it as one of my most interesting cards. Definitely by no means currently do I think it's going to be very dangerous. Do I think it has the potential to be dangerous? Yes, we've seen it, this sort of mechanic be dangerous in the past. And the fact that it's an artifact and hard to remove makes it that much better in my opinion, because once you resolve it, I don't think most of the time it's going to be able to get removed off the battlefield. But then again, this whole set is all about artifacts. We might see opponents, up the amount of artifact removals in their deck. So, this is one of those things. It's just kind of up in the air right now, and I feel like we can have some fun with this one before it becomes super popular, if it even becomes popular. So that's why I have it as one of my most interesting cards, in my opinion. My favorite card, because I feel like we're going to do a lot with this one and just have a lot of fun and be silly with it. So that's why it's my card number 4. And last but not least, my card number 5 I put in here just because I feel like it's going to be pretty busted. It's going to be this Kolodin. I don't know how to say his name, but I'm pretty sure that sounds about right. It's a 2-mana 2/3 legendary creature. But what this thing does is it gives all your vehicles and mounts haste. That's pretty insane by itself, because there's a lot of things that you want to saddle or crew up in this format. I mean, a lot, and a lot of really good things too. I've seen so many busted vehicles and saddle creatures, but you look at them and you go, well, it's got to wait a turn, it's got to do this. Well, if you've got this guy in the field, all of them become busted. I mean, we've already got some really cool saddle creatures right now. We've got that unicorn that creates 3/3 angels when it attacks in. There's so many busted creatures that we already currently had that can be saddled. Not so many vehicles, but we've got some great saddle creatures. We got the Henri, I forget the name of it, but it's Henri something. It creates, you know, 1/1 counters for creatures and doubles up on their power when it gets saddled. Not to mention all the new stuff we're getting. It's just absurd. And on top of that, the icing on the cake here is that all your vehicles and your saddling type creatures come in and they can be saddled or crewed immediately. Immediately. They don't even need to tap another thing. You just drop them on the field, you attack, and you get the benefits of them being saddled or crewed immediately. I think this card right here could break a lot of things. I mostly think this card is going to be what's going to give this set a lot of life. This set being obviously a ton of vehicles and saddle, you know, type creatures, or I should start saying mounts. Mounts and vehicles are a key role player in this deck and this set. And this set, you know, wants to showcase what it can do. This is a card that can really unlock the potential of what this set is trying to do. I think this card is really cool, and I think it's going to allow us to showcase Aether Drift to its full potential. I already have a pretty cool idea I want to do with this. I want to throw it in some Naya, and I've seen a ton of really cool artifacts and mounts to put with it that I think are going to be pretty busted. So that's why I have this at number 5. And yeah, I think this thing's going to be dangerous. So be on the lookout for that one. I guess we can look at some of the honorable mention type stuff here for us. All right, so our next couple of cards we're going to look at here, the honorable mention stuff, it's not specifically one card or two cards I want to talk about. It's more the idea, right? So we have 2 cards I want to just pull up here. We got Basri and we have this Burnout, right? This is just to showcase to you guys there's a bunch of really good cards in the new set that are just pretty busted in general, and I just wanted to give it honorable mention and explain a little bit. So Basri right here is a 1-drop creature, the same as Burnout, right? But if I had Burnout on my top 5 like most interesting cards, it'd be a lie because it's not interesting, right? It's another 1-drop red creature that's probably going to help red get even better, right? Because it activates, you know, the max speed mechanic. And this is, in my opinion, a card that I think makes a lot of sense with the start your engines and mechanic and, you know, the maxing out of the speed, because it comes down on turn 1. It starts your engines, which is what you need if you're going to do this mechanic anyways. And of course, red got one of the best cards for that. It's a 1-drop creature that can just do that right away. And it's got a really busted mechanic built into it with the max speed. It gets double strike, which is really easy for this thing to get. And on the way of dealing the damage, you're going to be hitting this thing with Monstrous Rage. You're going to be pumping this thing to the moon. So there's a lot of really busted cards like this. And again, like Basri is another one, in my opinion, that, you know, could really easily be played in a lot of decks and get broken, but mostly cats, of course. There's cat tribals, you know, already kind of floating out there at like a B tier deck list. And this, I feel like, could really take it to the next level, giving all your cats indestructible, hexproof, and all that stuff. By cycling it, the fact that it's legendary and you can cycle it to still get some value off of it is really good, because if you have one on the field, you cycle the second one, you're still getting value, which is insane. Not just card draw value, but you're getting actual value from it. And then you can keep creating tokens every single turn, which is really absurd, man. The fact that you can create a token every turn is so, like, it's just so good. I don't know how to explain it, man. I mean, every turn, let's just say, you know, wedding announcement, or, you know, things that just create tokens every turn for really efficient costs like this is just busted. And those tokens have lifelink, by the way, man, and it comes down on turn 1 and starts doing stuff. So I feel like this card's gonna be really busted, but there's a lot of cards like these. I've seen a lot of 1-drops in every single color. They all do something extremely well. I've seen a lot of gods that are indestructible. Almost every card I've seen so far has had like 15 keywords attached to it. The set's pretty busted, man. There's a lot of really good things to look at in this set that I think is going to be a lot of fun, but I think just powerful enough that it's going to make a difference in standard slightly. And I'm excited, man. I'm ready for some new cards. I was a little worried, I'm going to be honest, about Aether Drift. Just the whole flavor of Aether Drift didn't really speak to me. The whole cars and felt like Mario Kart to me, in my opinion. And I'm like, okay, well, whatever. It's not really my thing to, like, you know, talk negatively about, you know, anything about Magic or, you know, the set releases. It's just my opinion. I didn't think it was going to be super cool. I personally didn't have a problem with, like, other sets people did, you know, the whole clue token thing and like detectives and stuff. I know people had issues with, but I really kind of like that kind of stuff. I'm all for everything here, and I'm actually really liking Aether Drift right now. I think that, you know, now that I've seen the cards, seen the arts, and seen the flavor, I'm actually pretty into it, and I think that these cards are, you know, they surprised me quite a bit. And I think it's really because I don't play vehicles. I don't touch vehicles rarely ever. I've never really liked the mechanic of vehicles. I thought, you know, they're pretty underwhelming and boring. this might have changed my mind. There's a lot of cool things here, man, that I'm really enjoying and looking at, and I think could really shake things up. So I'm really excited, and the set definitely over exceeded my expectations. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is that there is going to be a early access event with you know, the creators. All your favorite creators are going to be there for the most part, and be streaming this on the Wednesday of next week. What day is Wednesday next week? Let me just double check to make sure I got the dates right, because I'm pretty sure it's the Wednesday. Let me see. That would fall on the 5th. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the 5th. The 5th of February, we're going to be playing Aether Drift cards, doing the early access event. If you guys haven't seen that before, it's basically all the bigger streamers and the people you know who play Magic online are going to get access to these cards early. We're going to just have fun playing against each other and, you know, regular play queues and showing off what they can do. So be sure to check that out. I should be live at some point during the day. I'm not too sure if I want to go live early or later, but it's going to be one of the two. And I'm going to be recording a lot of videos throughout the rest of the week for you guys. I've already got a ton of ideas I want to try out, so I'm really excited. It's pretty rare that I'm this ahead on the card knowledge on what's been bouncing around. So yeah, just I hope to see you guys there when it happens. And I'm looking forward to playing some Aether Drift, man, because Standard could use a shakeup. But yeah, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it informative. I don't do these videos often at all, really. This is kind of my first stab at this sort of thing. So let me know how we did. And hopefully we'll see you guys tomorrow with our Brawl video and back to Standard on Monday. Until next time, guys, thanks for watching. I love you. Peace out. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye.
Hit him 3 times like a hat trick. The name is Swayze, no Patrick. If you play him, then it's tragic. Hit him with the mythic, yeah, that's magic. Yeah, MTG, that's what you'll see if you like and subscribe. With the upload, man, man, all of the time. Coming with the best decks, this is the meta. This ain't cheap, yeah.